Hello. Well, today we're going to do chapter 9, and chapter 9 is communicating non-verbally. So, this is the last lecture. So, your exams were exam 1, chapters 1, 2, 3, exam 2, chapters 4, 5, 6, and now exam 3, chapters 7, 8, 9. For the remaining chapters, there are no lectures. So students will be relying on the textbook in order to answer the essay question regarding a particular chapter and the final research paper. So stay tuned for those instructions. But today we're going to talk about nonverbal communication. So as we've done in the past, we are going to share our screen with your PowerPoint, highlighting the information in your textbook. So when we talk about nonverbal communication, we are moving too fast. We are talking about transmission of meaning through unspoken physical or behavioral cues. And sometimes we use our nonverbal intentionally. So if I want to make a point, one of us, so that's an intentional. Unintentionally, I could say, I'm trying to figure it out. I really want to go. Yes, and then if I say, I really want to go, so that's a little bit contradictory. That was kind of hard. But sometimes we don't know what our nonverbal is doing. So we're going to find out and look at ways that when we're speaking, how listeners are understanding and interpreting our nonverbal communication. So when we interpret with nonverbal, we use multiple channels. You have your 5 senses, and it is definitely more ambiguous. So for example, if I were to teach and I had my hands crossed on the desk, someone may say, oh, they're so closed-minded. Look at their body. Meanwhile, maybe this is comfortable. Maybe it's cool in the room. So it is a little ambiguous. It is not a specific science, but your book and other articles in the sciences use experimental research to indicate that in X amount of cases where people folded their hands, they were showing uninterest or unimportance. And that's how we come up with most of our information here. So when you're reading the book, it is important to rely on the studies that have been conducted in order to state what it is saying. And we don't really have any rules. We don't have grammar rules, but we do know that we can use our voice to its best advantage in aiding in the meaning of things. So hello, hello, hello. Nonverbal, the use of my intonation is interpreted by the listener. So when we talk about nonverbal communication, as I stated, sometimes we're getting mixed messages. Verbal and nonverbal behaviors that convey contradictory meanings. So you may be asked a question in a job interview, and then your nonverbal, probably unaware to you, may move up, like your eyes going up, and that usually indicates that you're searching for an answer. So again, I said it's not a direct, but in more cases than not that were studied, this type of nonverbal communication meant that their answer was not forthcoming. So you had to think about it. Maybe you had to make it up, hopefully not. So on your Blackboard also, I'm going to be putting a link so that you want to be aware of maybe a few gestures or facial expressions. It's a PDF for a book that is called What Every Body is Saying, 2 separate words. And you could probably find it on your own as well. And maybe, there are so many chapters, facial expressions, gestures that you may want to use as a guide in the future. Okay, so most people need years of immersion in a culture before they fully understand the culture's nonverbal communication. So for example, Americans use their hands a lot. Other cultures do as well. Some cultures they purse their lips for directionals. Yeah. And then when we study a course, not at Westchester, but at other colleges, intercultural communication, it does explain other things about other cultures that go beyond this course. So women, see, now this study is done in 2000. That's a lot of years ago. So women and men are equally accurate in identifying both intense and subtle facial expressions of happiness, anger, sadness, fear. So those are your 7 emotions that we discussed in a previous chapter. And studies do suggest that few gender differences exist in the ability to interpret, but women may be better at communicating nonverbal messages. So I'm not going to quiz you on that at all, but we are seeing slight to no difference between any of the genders in nonverbal communication. We do know that you have to become aware that your nonverbal communication usually just comes out. It's not really planned. Maybe in a public speaking situation where you want to identify the first thing we have to do, the third thing we have to do. So those things can be planned if I'm a public speaker or reading from a manuscript. But usually in your job interviews, usually in your interpersonal communication with your friends, family, or employers, things are more impromptu. So you do not have time to plan. So we know that various media, use more nonverbal communications, the expressions that you have, YouTube or whatever. Many of you are more attracted, perhaps, to the media expressions nonverbally. And we know that even in this video where you only see, chest height up, you're focusing only on my facial expressions. So you do get a different perspective of nonverbal communication. So we have nonverbal communication codes, means used for transmitting information nonverbally. So I just want to take you to your to the area that we're talking about. Okay, so we're at the bottom of page 236. And the PowerPoints will go into, there's a little green box on the bottom of that page, which talks about the 7 codes of nonverbal communication. The first is kinesics, great word to pronounce. Visible body movements that communicate. So again, in a video like this, kinesics, you have just my facial expressions and eye contact. Maybe my hands get in there. If I were standing, then you have a waist height and a more posture and more visible body movements than just facial and eye contact. So a job interview, mostly facial and eye contact. I think they may be using the handshake. I don't know. I'm hesitant right now, but I think they have, and they probably will go back to it. So you need to know that visible body movements is called kinesics. And the study of kinesics is called kinesiology, which is wonderful. Oops, I went too far. Okay, so when we talk about gestures, and that's another, I want you to see that on page 238, is the definitions for emblems, illustrators, regulators, and adapters. So emblems represent specific verbal meanings. Let's see. So an emblem would be something that we're used to, a wave. So that's an emblem, which substitutes for the actual word. Illustrators accent or illustrate a verbal message. So the first thing we have to do, so I'm accenting it. And that's what an illustrator does. A regulator controls the exchange of conversation turns during interpersonal encounters. And this is what we've come across several different ways. When do I start to talk? When do I know to talk? And it might not be a parent or in a friend relationship, but definitely in a workplace environment, definitely in interviewing, you want to make sure comprehension is complete. And adapt, so regulators for nonverbal could be a long pause, could be a head nod, could be something with the hand. And as well as when you're answering the question, we need to know when you've completed rather than saying that's all I got. So we don't want to hear that's all I got. You probably will be using your eye contact, directing your answer to someone. And then maybe as you come to close, that's why you have that a sort of a summary statement. Or you can look up and then take a long pause. Adapters are touching gestures, often unconsciously made, that serve a psychological or physical purpose. So sometimes if you have a pen in your hand, it may be distracting to other people to that you're calming yourself down, and then other people are hearing the click. Or if you're having a conversation with a friend and they keep hitting you as they're talking because they want you to pay attention to what they're saying. So that's what adapters are. So posture is very important. While you've been watching these videos, I don't slump back in my seat. I'm always L. And the best posture is 2 feet flat on the floor. Make sure one foot's in front of the other, not even. Your body doesn't like even. Hands on top of your thighs